Morning, everyone. Please have a seat. So before we begin today, I thought I'd just put a final plug-in for the sign-up for the cyclothon. Remember, we're going to engage in a 24-hour cycling fundraiser in tribute to the Tour de Rock, who are going to arrive on Tuesday next week. Okay, so if you haven't signed up, please speak to your FA and make sure that we sign you up for the event, and that you receive a pledge sheet if you need one, because there's this idea that we're all trying to raise a minimum of $20 if we get involved in the cyclothon. Okay, so I just wanted to remind people that that's happening, and just see if we can boost the sign up ahead of the weekend. So this week, as those of you who are wearing orange and those of you who are aware of what we're building to, is a week dedicated to truth and reconciliation. And so I've gathered some thoughts together for today that I don't know if they're quite what I want to express. However, hopefully it's thought-provoking for you, and it gives you something to reflect on. Although no doubt you will all be engaged in reflection from time to time, or increasing lengths of time, as we look ahead to Truth and Reconciliation and the day as well on Monday. I'd really like to underline the importance of ceremony and cultural rituals and art as we move forward. And in preparing some of these words and doing some research, I'm continually learning about this topic and what's a really sensitive issue for many people, and what's a sensitive issue in society. I'm going to begin by reading a poem by Sherman Alexie, who's a Native American author. Some of you will have read his works. He's written not only works of fiction, but also poetry. This is titled "The Powwow at the End of the World." I'm told by many of you that I must forgive, and so I shall, after an Indian woman puts her shoulder to the Grand Coulee Dam and topples it. I'm told by many of you that I must forgive, and so I shall, after the flood waters burst each successive dam downriver from the Grand Coulee. I'm told by many of you that I must forgive, and so I shall, after the flood waters find their way to the mouth of the Columbia River as it enters the Pacific and causes all of it to rise. I'm told by many of you that I must forgive, and so I shall, after the first drop of flood water is swallowed by that salmon waiting in the Pacific. I'm told by many of you that I must forgive, and so I shall, after that salmon swims upstream through the mouth of the Columbia and then past the flooded cities, broken dams, and abandoned reactors of Hanford. I'm told by many of you that I must forgive, and so I shall, after that salmon swims through the mouth of the Spokane River as it meets the Columbia, and then upstream until it arrives in the shallows of a secret bay on the reservation where I wait alone. I'm told by many of you that I must forgive, and so I shall, after that salmon leaps into the night air above the water, throws a lightning bolt at the brush near my feet, and starts the fire which will lead all of the lost Indians home. I'm told by many of you that I must forgive, and so I shall, after we Indians have gathered around the fire with that salmon, who has 3 stories it must tell before sunrise. One story will teach us how to pray. Another story will make us laugh for hours. The third story will give us reason to dance. I'm told by many of you that I must forgive, and so I shall, when I'm dancing with my tribe during the powwow at the end of the world. Our relationship with forgiveness is highly complex. In my grade 10 year at high school, I learned about how the social environment had been manipulated by an individual in order to increase their standing in our peer group and to devalue mine. It was hardly the most heinous crime, but for over a decade, I held a deep resentment towards his actions, and rather than seeking forgiveness, I allowed my initially strong resentment for the situation to diminish to the point of fizzling out. But I never really found or sought forgiveness, and there was a part of me that didn't want to. I'd been wronged, and the emotional impact was a barrier to forgiveness. On reflection, I'm not sure what could have been said or done after the fact that would have made me feel better. When he explained his motives to me in grade 10, it helped my understanding a little because I had inwardly turned the blame, and now there was a rationalization for the certain experiences I had had. I cannot pretend that some of my actions or words towards others would not have also harbored ill will or resentment towards me. The niggling I directed towards my brothers could also be unleashed at others, and I'm certain I upset a few of my peers as I tried to navigate grades 8 and 9, jockeying for social standing by keeping others down rather than by lifting them up. Although I could see the errors of my ways, I lacked the maturity or wherewithal to apologize properly or let them understand why I acted as I did. I spent little time considering the impact on their lives, and I had little to no understanding of how to restore or repair these relationships. A few years back, I contacted one of my peers from school to apologize for how I treated him and to try and elaborate on my regret and thoughtlessness. I never heard back, and I understand why. When we're hurt, individually or collectively, resentment can run deep, and the process of overcoming it is slow and complicated. Although I'd never claimed to be an expert on forgiveness, my readings suggest that forgiveness can be separated into two categories, emotional and decisional. And they're interestingly distinct because of the health impacts that one can elicit over the other. When we decide to forgive someone or something, but are not convinced deep down that we should, we might be able to improve a relationship, yet we won't receive the mental and physical health benefits that come through emotional forgiveness. With this approach, when we try to emotionally forgive someone, we actually hold them less responsible for their transgressions. I'm sure you can think of a time when you were asked to forgive someone or something, and you may have agreed to it. However, you were not willing to yield the internal resentment which you kept vaulted deep within. In these circumstances, there is a negative residue that's never removed, but rather festers within. In Sherman Alexie's poem, The Powwow at the End of the World, he reinforces the complexity of our relationship with forgiveness and the challenges of overcoming the results of hurtful and harmful transgressions. The details of my negative experiences at high school seem inconsequential relative to the impacts of colonization, and this is central to my point. Forgiveness is a hard enough destination for some people to reach, even when the magnitude of wrong can appear relatively small. In the poem, the narrator tells how an ecosystem and all those relying on it are affected by the intervention of a dam, by the need or desire to control a resource. The narrator tells of how his food supply is strangled and how they're told they must forgive. The poem challenges this by stating that the transgressions must be undone before forgiveness can be given. And this underpins much of the complexity of our relationship with forgiveness in a time of national reconciliation. Alexie's poem underlines a key problem with today's situation post-colonization. We can never literally undo what has been done. You could perhaps literally bring down a dam, but the Grand Coulee Dam is a symbol of so much more, both tangible and intangible, both recorded and unrecorded, which makes forgiveness a mirage for hearts that might want to move forward, but know they cannot and should not let go of what happened. It's further complicated when we receive updates like those of last week from St. Mary's Residential School in Mission, where 158 First Nations children were buried in unmarked graves. Chief David Jimmy of the Stolo Nation said, "The heaviness of the work today cannot be summed into words." Sherman Alexie's poem inspired the topic of forgiveness, and I would venture it's an important one, because as we consider our path in this process of truth and reconciliation, reconciliation is incredibly challenging to come by without forgiveness. Reconciliation involves the restoring of a relationship, and there's such a long journey to walk as this process unfolds. From time to time, we're lucky enough to be part of opportunities to develop a relationship. On campus, as we sit here, a canoe lies in Spurgeon Courtyard, hoping to share learning about Coast Salish art and culture, about the significance of the cedar tree within the Coast Salish peoples, the value of learning by watching and listening, and the opportunity to learn from the Kohiman community, who bring knowledge and stories from the Cowichan tribes. The songs of Sonia Charlie during the blessing of the canoe spread through the air and into those of us who were gathered there. And when we were organizing the ceremony, we listened to the important cultural practices that needed to be followed. Even though I did not fully understand why things needed to be as they were, they gradually became clearer on the day as the event unfolded. I was able to relax enough to trust that things would unfold as they would unfold. I'm going to read a short excerpt from an email I received from Miss Powley the other day, and because I think it's really relevant to the power of ceremony and to the role of the arts. The Truth and Reconciliation Committee final report included a section on the power of ceremony. Sacred ceremony has always been at the heart of Indigenous culture, law, and political life. When ceremonies were outlawed by the federal government, they were hidden away until the law was repealed. These ceremonies must now be recognized as an integral, vital, ongoing dimension of the truth and reconciliation process. Ceremonies also reach across cultures to bridge the divide between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples. They're vital to reconciliation because of their sacred nature and because they connect people, preparing them to listen respectfully to each other in a different dialogue. I feel that ceremony reached many of those points. There's also a section on the unique role of the arts. Across the globe, arts have provided a creative pathway to breaking silences, transforming conflicts, and mending the damaged relationships of violence, oppression, and exclusion. Art can be powerful and provocative. Through their work, Indigenous artists seek to resist and challenge the cultural understandings of settler-dominated versions of Canada's past and present reality. Sharing intercultural dialogue about history, responsibility, and transformation through the arts is potentially healing and transformative for both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples. Through events like the canoe ceremony, cultural practices are handed on and reinforced to the younger generation, and we witnessed that as the grandchildren of Cowichan chief Lydia Whitsom came forward and were integrated into the event. The shared understanding that was built in that space during the event helped bring people and cultures closer together. I hope that the way we hosted the event on the unceded and traditional territory of the Cowichan tribes demonstrated a level of respect for their culture and went in some way to developing that relationship. As I move towards closing comments and handing over to a Pierpont Cree First Nations singer-songwriter, musician, and visual artist, I hope you can reflect on the concept of forgiveness and consider its role in reconciliation, whether you're looking at the national level, the societal level, or whether you're looking at a local level, perhaps even reconciling a relationship with a friend or someone in your family. Understanding the context of their actions and their motivations will be important, as well as identifying how they might help restore the relationship that had been in a better place. As we move through this week, wearing our orange in tribute and contemplating the relationships that used to exist on this land and how they've changed, I hope that we will work together towards a better place, whatever that looks and feels like, where people can more easily find forgiveness, where truth has been discovered and presented and deliberated over, where partnerships can be built, where trust can be re-established, where metaphorical dams can be broken, and where the idea of control can be reimagined. As Buffy St. Marie sang, "The road is long, there are mountains in the way, but we climb a step every day."
A life of its own thanks to Joe Cocker and Jennifer Warren. This is the songwriter's version of Up Where We Belong. from the worlds we know, up where the clear winds blow. Time goes by, no time to cry. Life's you and I alive. Today, love lift us up where we belong, where the eagles cry on a mountain high. Love lift us up where we belong, far from the worlds we know, up where the clear winds blow. Love lift us up where we belong, where the eagles cry on a mountain high. Love lift us up where we belong, far from the worlds we know, up where the clear winds blow.
What a great concept, up where we belong, right? That, I want to, well, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Monroe for taking us into a really important but really complex area, and for doing it so well and so eloquently. So, Mr. Monroe, thank you again. Buffy St. Marie referred to Joe Cocker and Jennifer Warnes, and they were the ones that made that song famous. Does anyone know which movie it was the theme song for?
An Officer and a Gentleman?
Officer and a Gentleman, thank you, Ms. Lee. Great movie. Possibly one of the greatest closing scenes of all time, but I'll leave you to look that up. Anyway, but it's the concept of love lifting us up where we belong, up on the higher ground. And that's what forgiveness does. It actually trying to exercise forgiveness takes you up onto the higher ground. You're not down there in amongst all that sort of negativity and small-mindedness and all that type of thing. You're up there. So that's what we want. Forgiveness is such a hard thing to really embrace, but we have to. We won't make progress if there's a great line in there where she says some live their lives looking behind, and if you spend your lives looking behind and resenting what happened, then you can't make progress. So you know, it requires an awful lot of overcoming fear. A fear that I'm going to be a lesser person by forgiving. It's quite the opposite, actually. I'm going to be a bigger person by forgiving, a bigger person. So yeah, it's, as I said the other day, one of the few benefits of getting old is that you actually have lived long enough to see things happening. And so when I was growing up, and when I first became aware, for example, of apartheid in South Africa, that very much the segregation, the racial segregation, I couldn't believe that could ever not be the case. But in my lifetime, it was dismantled by Mandela, and as the principal architect of it. And South Africa is a very different place these days. Now, does it still have problems? Of course it does, right? Everywhere has still challenges and problems. But the amount of forgiveness that had to take place for that to happen is quite remarkable. So, yeah. So that's one very tangible example. We are on a journey, which is a long and complex one. But if we go there with forgiveness in our hearts and with that as something that we embrace, we'll get there. We'll get to where we want to be, up there. That's enough. Thank you.